then. Hello, I'm Father Aaron, and welcome back to The Dungeon Minister. I'm never going to get used to saying that. As I mentioned last time, I want to take you through the campaign that I'm running for my boys. Now, when we started, I gave the player's manual to my eldest, and he read it out to his brothers, and they all decided they wanted to be elves. I mean, elves sound pretty cool, right? They can fight, they can do magic, it's all good. The problem was, back when I was gaming in the day, we didn't have any elves in our campaign, and so I didn't actually have a good handle on how to run elves, on how to organize the world around them. I had not done any reading about elf society and elf communities, and so I thought, here's what we're going to do. The elf woods will be nearby to a human settlement. That I know. And so they'll leave the elf woods, and they'll go to a nearby town, and that's where they'll find their adventures. And it has the whole, leaving home for a great adventure kind of thing anyway, which is what you want in a good campaign. Fine. So I decided we'd have a little town, and it would be a small town way up in the north. It would be far to the north. And I decided to name the town Honeywood, actually, in homage to Viva La Dirt League. If you don't know Viva La Dirt League, go check them out. They're hilarious. The Epic NPC Man skets are set in the fictional town of Honeywood. It's supposed to be a video game combination of sort of Skyrim and Warcraft. Or Warrim and Skycraft. I don't know, but at any rate, it's set in the fictional town of Honeywood. So in homage to that, I named our town Honeywood. So we began the adventure with them leaving the elven forest in search of adventure, and they decide to go to this nearby human settlement. And when they get there, classic, right? They're in the pub. They're in the local pub. And they overhear the mayor talking about the troubles. And so they go and they ask the mayor, what's going on? We've come here looking for adventure. That sounds like an adventure. What's happening? And the mayor says, well, people have been attacked on the road. We don't know who's attacking them. They attack at night. They have killed some people. They've robbed some people. It's clearly getting out of hand. And we don't have the troops here to deal with it. We're starting to raise a town guard because now we know that there's trouble this close. It's always been peaceful here, but now there's trouble close, and so we're raising a town guard, but we don't have them trained yet. We don't have the equipment for them yet, and we need to stop this. So the intrepid adventurous elves say, yes, we'll do it, and off they trek. And we had them see a farmer on the way and talk to the farmer, and there's been trouble out this way. I don't know. I don't let my animals out at night no more. No, I don't. Okay, fine, and off they go. And what they discover is a spot in the road where they've been told it's just before the curve where the road goes south. Just at that curve is where the trouble's happening, and they find a little side path there. And they say, okay, this has got to be the problem. Now, they arrive in the morning. They set off first thing in the morning. They arrive at like 10, 11 o'clock. And so it's early day. It's bright light out. There's not going to be any trouble here on the road. But they dive in through this side path. And what they encounter, about halfway down the path, they encounter two kobolds. And they fight the kobolds. The kobolds see them coming and shoot an arrow at them, and so they know that this is their enemies, so they start a fight, and blah, blah, blah. They don't have any trouble taking care of two kobolds. And here's the thing, I picked kobolds intentionally. You want to have a dungeon where your characters can feel like badasses, right? They did something. They accomplished something. The problem is, if you've got 10 goblins, they're going to just decimate 3 first-level elves, right? It's not going to be it's just going to be too many numbers. The numbers will be too great, right? But kobolds they're like paper. You can cut through them easy. The other thing is, I've got a 6-year-old playing, I've got a 9-year-old playing, and frankly, an 11-year-old playing, and they're my kids. I'm not going to kill them off. So I want to give them enemies they can defeat. But I also want it to be a real substantial victory. Not just, we went and we killed 2 goblins or 3 goblins or 4 goblins or something. I want it to be substantial. I want to have a lot of enemies. At least a dozen, right? So if you're going to have a dozen of something, for first level characters to fight, kobolds are a great option. Because they're mean, they're nasty, they're conniving, they're intelligent, so you can have them fighting with purpose. They can have a scheme going on. They can have a plan going on. It's not just random animals in the wilderness, but they fall like paper. I mean, they're nothing. So they ran into these two kobolds who were in a little, they made themselves a little shelter from the sun, and they were watching the path. And they're the sentries, right? But the elves, right away, one of them used a magic missile spell because, they're itching to get their hands on the spell. So they launched the spell, and they take care of the kobolds, no problem. Few copper pieces kind of thing. And then they continue on the path. They find the opening of a cave. So they stop and they have their lunch, which I thought was just practical of them. And then they go in. And I'm going to show you the dungeon here. It starts as a natural cave. And you see, I've just done it on lined paper. I didn't even go and get graph paper because I suspected this would be the only adventure they did. Anyhow, I was wrong. But they go in and it's a natural cave, but at the back of it, the cave has been worked and turned into a sort of proper passageway. Now, later I developed a history for this. Later on I went back and I developed the why behind this because, again, I like to know why, right? It has to make logical sense. But at the time I was just making this dungeon. So they go in and they come to an intersection, and at that intersection they can, if they stop and they actually want to see if they can hear anything or sense anything, from their right, there's a breeze coming in. So they know there's going to be some sort of exit that way. From the other direction, they hear murmuring, just low voices, but they can't make anything out. They can't identify words. They cannot even identify language. Now, they're assuming that these are more kobolds from what they've just faced. They decide to go to the left. And they go down this curving passage, and as they go, it lowers. It looks like little stair marks there, but it's just a sloping passage. And they get to the end and turn the corner, and they're in this 30 by 30 room. There are 4 kobolds sitting around a table, and they're drinking and talking. They're playing a dice game. At this point, I think it was the middle boy said, "Are they playing Dungeons and Dragons?" Which would be funny, You walk into a suburban home. There's a family sitting down to dinner. You attack, They step into the room. The kobolds give a holler and grab weapons, and there's a great battle. And it was a pretty good battle. I mean, it got close there. There was some close moments, but they did defeat the 4 of them. However, the sound of the battle did carry through the corridors. The metal on metal crash and slam and screams and yells and everything else. The sound carried. And so by the time that battle finishes up, 3 more kobolds round the corner to see what's happening. And this is why I designed the dungeon this way. Because the 2 large rooms that you can get to initially, without any doorways in between, are far enough apart that if a battle is happening in one, the sounds of it, if the creatures in the other room are occupied doing something and they're making noise of their own, the sound of that battle won't immediately alert them. This is a problem I have in a lot of sort of stock designed dungeons, and the ones that are in this book, to begin with, are examples of it. Why don't the monsters in one room hear the fight happening in the other room? Particularly in that adventure with not the one with Alina, the one after that with the rust monster. In the next room, there's a skeleton holding a sword. Why has the rust monster not gone after that sword? I mean, it was willing to attack the fighter. Why would it not be willing to attack the skeleton? Why didn't it find the goblins and take all of their stuff? Plus, gold doesn't rust. But that's another issue. So I wanted the 2 areas to be separated enough, but close enough that if the battle took too many rounds, the sound would drift through and the people in the other room would hear and they'd come to investigate. So 3 of them come around the corner. But it's important the distance because that way you give the characters time to defeat the first monsters before the next round shows up. Because otherwise you've got 7 opponents fighting you at once, right? And that's too much. Just by the law of averages, they're going to hit you so many times, your characters aren't going to survive. But if you face 4 at a time, 3 at a time, it's okay. So these other 3 come in, and only 2 of them are armed. And so the characters start the fight, and the one who's unarmed boots it out of there. They make quick work of the 2 kobolds that were there, and then they make a pursuit, and they chase up the corridor. They don't get any further than the intersection, though, when more kobolds come pouring around the corner. And so there's a fight in the hallway. That fight actually turned out, and again, it's just the roll of the dice, actually turned out to be the hardest of the entire adventure. In fact, one of the elves nearly died, and he actually would have, except I just rolled the dice and said he misses. Because again, I'm not going to kill my own kids. Not on their first adventure, at any rate. So they finally do defeat them, a hard-fought battle, and then they continue on down the corridor. And what they find down there in the room marked 5 is actually a kitchen. It's where the kobolds were cooking their food. And there's a little fire pit, and above that there's just a natural crack in the ceiling that's developed over the years since this dungeon was made. The erosion and whatnot has made a crack in the ceiling, and so the smoke goes right out. Perfect. So they're making their meal there. So they were cooking and eating and talking on this end of the dungeon, which is why they didn't hear the combat at the other end until it had gone on a little while. Well, of course, there's a door in here, and they go in and they find a storeroom, and there's barrels of salted fish, and there's some onions. And my youngest boy said he takes the onions and he starts eating onions for the rest of the adventure. He's popping onions in his mouth, and all sorts of kind of food that you wouldn't want to eat, meat that may have gone off. The kobolds are perfectly happy with. Now there's a secret door there. They didn't find that one. They didn't even think to look at it, and they're wondering, well, is that it? Have we defeated all the monsters? Have we solved the problem? Can we go back to the mayor and get the reward? I think the mayor had said he'll give him 10 gold or something like that for clearing this dungeon of monsters, for solving the problem. They didn't know the dungeon existed, but for solving the problem of the attacks. And I said, well, you haven't found anything, but you haven't looked for any secret passageways or anything like that. And this is the sort of hand-holding that you kind of have to do in first level, right? For people who've never played before. You kind of have to nudge them toward things. And then, of course, the eldest remembers, oh yeah, elves are really good at finding secret doors. So they look in the kitchen, and they actually do look in the storeroom, and they don't find that door. But then they go around to the main room where they fought in, and they find the secret door there, which leads to the treasure room. They find in there a chest, and they go and they open it right away, and that's their mistake, so I have them roll. It was the middle boy, I think, opened the chest, and so he had to do a saving throw versus poison. Fortunately, he made his saving throw. If he hadn't, it wasn't going to be a deadly poison. It was going to cause X number of extra points of damage, and that would have been determined by how many hit points he had at the time. It would have gotten him within 2 of death or something. In the chest, there's a good deal of treasure, jewelry, and things like that. There's some coins, but there's a lot of jewelry, and this is from the people that they'd robbed on the road. There's also coins that they robbed from people on the road, and some gems, etc. So they find this, but there's also a door there. Not a secret door, just a door. And they go through it, and down the long corridor you can see there, and you can see I first had designed it as another dungeon room, but I changed it. And so the squiggly rough line is the official, that's the official line. It goes down to another natural cave, just like the entrance had been a natural cave that was then expanded on and tunneled into to make the dungeon. There's a natural cave here. And you see the sort of central circle drawn there, or oval or blob. That is where you could stand up. And the edge, so it's the natural cave that comes down. So that marks kind of where you can stand. What's in this room, though, along the south wall, there was a skeleton. Not animated, an actual just dead skeleton. Next to this skeleton, there was a sword, all rusted and useless. There was a pouch of some treasure. Also a healing potion in that pouch, which I knew they might need before what happened next, because you can see the little stub of a corridor that leads to the secret door in the pantry. That little stub of a corridor has been used as a nesting area for a giant beetle, a giant fire beetle, which scuttles out at them just after the most injured elf in the party drinks that healing potion. This beetle comes scuttling out and attacks them, and so they have to fight the beetle. And so the story here is that this natural cave has been used by some monster, by a giant beetle, to make its nest in. And when they investigate that rough nest, they discover the remains of a kobold. And then they can see from this side the secret door isn't secret, and they can see that there's a door there. And there they find they're back in the kitchen. So they've got their treasure. They fought 2 different kinds of monsters. Of the big monsters, there was only one, so they could gang up on it, and it wasn't as big of a threat. And of course, the paper tigers or the kobolds, they fought a whole bunch of. And they head back in triumph, and they go back to the town, and thank you, you've cleared up the problem. No, we don't know the people whose treasure it is. We don't know whose is what. The jewelry nobody recognizes. It must have been from people they had killed, or from people who were traveling away from Honeywood, and we don't know where they are anymore. So you can keep it. So they get to keep all the treasure. Bada bing, it's done. Now, like I said, I always want to know why, right? Now, when I designed this, I figured they're going to play this and that'll be it. So I didn't need to know why. Who cares why? But they really liked it and they wanted to play it. So then I had to think, well, why? Why particularly kobolds? Because kobolds are cowardly creatures, right? They're nasty, they're evil, but they are weak and they know they're weak. And in my campaign, I play them very dog-like. Oh, sorry.